Okay, so in this video, I'm going to walk us through building our first console application and HelloWorld program. The objectives for this walkthrough are going to be to create a new project in Visual Studio. We'll explore the Visual Studio interface a little bit just to familiarize ourselves with how we can navigate it to get some basics of basic programming done. And we'll create a Visual C# CLI program or a console application, and then we're going to make some edits to and run that program. So let's get it. First thing we're going to do here is we're going to start up our Visual Studio. That's going to present us with a window here to choose what type of program project we'd like to create. So we can clone or check out code from different repositories online, or open existing projects or local folders. But we're going to do in this case is we're going to create a brand new project, and it tells you here we get the chance to choose a project template, some code scaffolding to get started. So that's important. So it's going to give us a lot of the fundamental foundation pieces that we need to just run the program quickly, and we can just get to editing our code. So I'm going to click on create a new project, and then it's going to ask us for some details. So up in the top here, we've got a little search that we can use to search through. And it's basically asking us, like, what kind of a template do you want to use for this application? And for us in this course, we'll be using C# and we'll be building console applications. So this top level option, the console app with .NET Core, C#, that's exactly what we want. We want to create a project for creating command line applications that can run in .NET Core across this platform. So we'll click on this option, I'll highlight it, and then we can click on next. And then it's going to ask you for a name for your project. And so this one's going to be pretty straightforward. We'll just create this one as Hello World. And you'll notice I don't have any spaces in my naming. That's a convention I like to follow. And then below that, we've got the location for where we'd like to place the files for our project. The default is going to be in a source/repos folder in your user directory, but you can choose another location by clicking on the browse ellipses over here. I'm fine with leaving it where it is. You can always copy and move that later if you want to make a change. And then below, you'll see an option for a solution name, and it gives you a little information icon here. And it says a solution is just a container for one or more projects in Visual Studio. And so that's fine. We're just going to have the one project in there. And so what I've done is I've got this, I've checked this previously, so it'll stay checked for future projects. So yours may be unchecked, but I've just checked this box that says place a solution and the project in the same directory. There's just fewer directories to navigate through to find the actual program files. So in this case, and for most of our projects, I'm going to leave this checked. And so once that's all set up, we've got our name, we've got our location set, we can then click on create. Visual Studio will do its thing. It's going to scaffold the project for us and create all the required files and directories. And then it's going to open the interface. And there we go. So now we've got our Visual Studio editor up and running. There are a couple of additional pieces here that weren't present in the initial install video that we went through earlier. So let's just explain a few of these pieces. Right here in this main area that we can see in the editor is kind of our main program or source code editing area. And you can see we've got some text. It's colored using a syntax highlighter. We'll talk more about that later. And you've got some line numbers over here in what's called this gutter area. You can see there's a tab at the top. It says P program.cs. Now that's the name of the file that we've got our code sitting in. So this is just a plain text file. There's nothing fancy about it. If we could find the file in our file system, and I'll do that in just a moment, you could open this file in, plain text editor like Notepad, and it will just look exactly the same as it does here without all the fancy coloring and additional annotations like these dashed lines and things like that. But that's all it is. It's just a text file. And then over here on the far right side, we can see something called a Solution Explorer. And the Solution Explorer is kind of exactly what it sounds like. It allows us to explore all the different required pieces and relevant parts of our solution, our project. And so you can see below that, there's a little C# icon here. So this is our C# console app. It's called HelloWorld. And then in here, you can see there's some dependencies, which we don't need to look at right now. But then you can see here's a C# program.cs. So if you click on this, you'll see it gives you some additional details down below about this file. So that the properties for program.cs. But this file is just what we're seeing here in the editor. So these two are linked together. Got this selected. This is the code that we can see that's inside this file. If you're able to navigate in the File Explorer to where your files were saved, so mine were saved in that source repos folder, you can see creating that project, all it did was create a folder with the same name in that location that I had selected. And if I go inside, you can see there's a couple of additional folders and files I don't see in the Solution Explorer, but that are required for the Visual Studio to do its thing with our project. So you can see here there's a .cs approach file, so that's got settings and things that we need for our project. We've got a solution file, which again acts as just a container for everything that's in our project. And then here we can see our program.cs file. So this again is just a plain text file. We could open this with Notepad or something, and it would just have the same contents that we see here in the editor. So if you wanted to copy and move this to a USB drive, or you wanted to share it or upload it or something like that, all you would need to do is just copy these files. You could put them into a zip archive or something, and then you could save them somewhere else. But that's all it is. So there's no real magic going on here. It's just files and folders. And then what Visual Studio does is just kind of give us a nice layout and overview of those files so that we can work with them and be efficient. Like most typical Windows applications, you can see at the top, we've got our menu of options. So under the File menu, if you're familiar with these types of applications, typical options like creating new projects, opening projects, you can save your file, and different things like that. You can close a solution entirely to open another one, right? Edit, it's got typical things like we can undo and redo edits. We can go to certain places or lines or files, lots of options here. View, etc., etc. And so throughout the course, we'll look at a number of these different options as they're required. But for now, we don't have to spend too much time investigating all the different parts of the editor. We'll just focus on the pieces that we're going to need to get what we need done. And so let's have a look at the code here and see what's going on. A lot of the code that we can see right now in the window is what I refer to as boilerplate. So these lines here, 1 through 7, are really just kind of standard code statements. We need those there to be able to run the project or run our program. We'll spend more time looking at, for example, what this line really means once we start talking more about methods. But for now, all we really need to take away from this is, this is our program. We've got something here called a main method, and just kind of like it sounds, this is kind of the main starting point for our program. And then you've got these braces that follow it, and you'll see a little dashed line here between these two. And these braces really kind of denote the content of our program. So any programming statements that we want to execute right now that are part of our program, they have to be contained within these two braces. And right now you can see there's only one single line that's in between here on line 9, and this is the sole programming statement in our program at this point. And I think without me explaining it to you, you can very easily decipher what this statement is asking our program to do. We've got here an identifier that allows us to access the console, and if you hover over with your cursor, you can see it gives you a little pop-up, what we call some IntelliSense or tooltips that help describe what's going on with our code inside the editor. And it says here, this console represents the standard input, output, and error streams for console applications. So that's what console represents here in our code, is exactly what it sounds like, is the command line interface. So we can both write output statements to the console, and we can also input statements or data from the console. And we'll do that in later applications. And then connecting console to this write line, what we call here a write line method, is a little dot. And the dot operator is what we use to say, hey, I've got some identifier here. The dot immediately following it says, I'd like to access some part of this, right? I need to do something with the console. And so when we type in console dot, it's going to allow us to tap into different methods or values that exist on the console itself. Now in this case, we're accessing a specific method. It's called WriteLine. You'll notice there are no spaces in between. That's important, and we'll talk more about that later. But WriteLine is a defined method, and you can see again, if you hover your cursor over it, it gives you a little pop-up. It tells you a little bit about it. And it says here that this is going to write the specified string value followed by the current line terminator to the standard output stream. So the line terminator depends on your platform, but that's fine. All we really need to take away from this is the first part, which is that it's going to write a string value to the output stream. And the standard output stream, as we've already identified, is the console. So that's perfect. Okay, so we state the method name WriteLine, and then we got these parentheses. So there's an open and closed parenthesis, and this denotes kind of what we call the argument list for the method. We're calling this method. And what that allows us to do is to kind of pass in or specify inside these parentheses what the values are we want to give to the method. So the method is going to write something in the console, but we need some means of saying, hey, like, this is the thing I want to write. And so within these parentheses, we can specify, in this example, what we call a string, which is just a double quoted string of characters. And we can pass that to this method and then have it write that out to the console. So right now it's pretty simple. It just says hello world with an exclamation mark. And that's all our program is going to do at this point. The statement here is terminated with a semicolon. And all the statements in our C# programs are going to end with semicolons. You can just think of the semicolon at the end of these statements like you would use a period at the end of a sentence in some written work. So that's how we say, hey, here's a statement, I want you to do something, and we end that statement with a semicolon. And then if we had additional statements we wanted the program to carry out, then we would just press enter at this point, we'd go to a new line, and then we could type in another statement, and we could continue to do that for as many statements as we need to solve whatever problem it is we're facing. So that's kind of it. Super simple, but it's not really doing anything at this time. So what we want to do is run this program so that we can see the output. Now there are a couple of ways to go about doing this, but the simplest way is to just right up here in the toolbar, you can see there's an option here with a green play button beside our project name HelloWorld. And if you click on this, it'll execute it in debug mode, which is basically just going to run it in the terminal. And if we wanted to, we could set somewhere called breakpoints, so we could walk through our code. But for now, all we need to know is that's just going to run the program as we've defined it. If you go up to the debug menu, you'll see there's an option that matches that green play arrow that says start debugging. And there's also a shortcut key, the F5 key. So if you just press F5, that'll do the same thing as coming into the debug menu and clicking start debugging, or just clicking the green play button by the project here from the toolbar. So I'm just going to click on this, and you'll see it's going to do some magic, some work here. It's going to build our project. We'll talk more about building projects and compiling in a later lesson. But once it's all finished and that's all done, we're going to see a command line window or a command prompt or terminal if you're on your Mac, and it's going to show us here, right, Microsoft Visual Studio Debug Console, and here is our output, right, hello world. And then below that it says, hey, this is where it ran from, and some other stuff. And the most important piece here is just press any key to close this window. But there's our output. So we can see our program works. We didn't really do anything. It was scaffolded for us, but at least we kind of walked through what the statement means, and we can execute it. So I'm just going to press enter, and that's going to close that window. And now, so for the fun part is, actually writing something in the program for ourselves. So one really simple exercise to introduce yourself to the world of programming here is just to make edits to this string that we're passing to the WriteLine method, and then going through that process of editing the code and then saving the code and then running the program so that we can see our updated output. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to click inside here with my cursor, and I'm going to delete the word world, and I'm just going to type in my name, and you can do the same with yours. And so now we've made some edits to this program, but we haven't saved them. Okay, and you'll notice up here in the tab for the program file, it's got a little asterisk here on the top of the the S from .cs. And that's just a nice kind of visual cue that you've made some edits to this file that haven't been saved yet. Okay, the program, the edits are only existing in Visual Studio at this time. They're not actually saved out to the file that exists here in our file system. Okay, so if we make changes in here, we want to persist those to the actual file, you've got to save them. So a couple of ways to do that. The most verbose way is to go through the file menu, and you'll see there's an option here to save program.cs. But there's also a nice shortcut key combo, the Control plus S key combination, and that'll do it for you too. So you could click on this from the menu, or if you're in your code, you can just press Control plus S, and you'll notice that the little asterisk is gone, and that tells us that we've kind of saved our updates. And so that's it. We've made an edit, and now we want to see those edits on the command prompt. And so now what we can do is we can just go back up here and try to run this program again. And if you click on the green arrow with Hello World, it'll go through the same process we saw previously, where it's going to build the project for us, and then there we can see our new updated output. So it's no longer saying Hello World, now it's hello and my name or your name if you put that in there. And that's that. So that's kind of really all there is to getting started with console applications in Visual Studio. We walked through creating a new project, we named it, we chose a location, and then we were able to just quickly make a little edit inside the code itself and able to run the program as well. So this is just a really good introduction to Visual Studio and the kind of work that we're going to do. By the end of the course, your programs are going to be spread across multiple files. There'll be lots of lines of code. They'll be quite complex compared to what we can see here. But this is our humble beginnings. This is where we can start tinkering and exploring. And we're just going to do it one line at a time. So the exercises that'll go along with the upcoming lessons here are going to be pretty simple to start. We're going to start like we have here with just a single output statement, and then we'll add another one and then several more. And then we'll just keep adding on. And like I said, by the end of the course, if you were to compare the final projects with this first one, you're going to be amazed at the work you've done. So thanks for sticking around for this walkthrough, and we'll see you in the next video.